Welcome to ND and Me, a podcast to share NDers' lived experiences. I'm Richard, an ND coach, mentor, accountability buddy, and business consultant.
Hi, Alia. How are you?
Hi, I'm good, Richard. Thank you. How are you? But now we're after the bank holiday.
Yes, it is the day after the first May bank holiday, and this is the first recording for season 2 of ND and Me. And yeah, it's exciting to be back recording, back speaking to some awesome people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm joined today by Alia, who's doing lots and lots of cool, wonderful things. And I don't want to butcher her bio. Alia, talk to us. Who are you?
Oh, thank you, Richard. First of all, it's really good to be here. So thanks for having me for the first episode. It is very exciting indeed. So I am a business owner, content writer, author, and I'm a communications coach. I'm actually from Surrey, but I'm based up in Manchester. And kind of my focus is I help people write more effectively, essentially. So through my coaching, I give people more, confidence to be a better communicator, basically. More so than I'm speaking right now because I focus on the written form. But essentially how to write more effectively. So kind of emails, LinkedIn messages and all sorts. And I got my ADHD and autism diagnosis last year. And already specialising in communication, what I realised when you pull back the layers is that as, neurodivergents, we have so many extra layers to think about when it comes to communication. So kind of pivoted, if you like, to really help people navigate those challenges.
Fab. So your diagnosis, was that through the NHS? Was that private? What drew you to seeking out a diagnosis?
Eventually it was private, but it was really interesting because I had a series of health conditions I believed to be the reason I was just the way I was. I just thought I was a bit broken, to be honest. I just thought I was a bit of a can I swear?
You can do whatever you like. I'll just mark it not for kids.
I just thought I was a bit of a shit human. Yeah. Because I would not be able to, I'm very good at certain things. I'm very fast. I've got 3 businesses and people just think, oh, how do you do that? I'm just faster than you. just get more done. And I just thought, I would look at other people and think, how are you doing this so effortlessly? Some basic things. The other day I had to sort a utility bill out. I cried. I'm 32 years old. I've got the money was there. It was just the stress. And before my diagnosis, I would look at things like this and I just thought, oh, this world is not meant for you. Just like isolate away, just try and get through it and bumble through in your own accord. And 2 things I really blocked my reality is, first of all, I got hit by a car I was 22, so 32 now, so a decade ago. And at the time I got post-traumatic concussion, which basically was like getting hit so hard, everything would wobble and it just didn't stop wobbling. So what I now reality is my executive dysfunction struggles. I just put that down to, maybe I got concussion and maybe I still have concussion 8-9 years later. So that was one side. And then the other was I thought I had hearing loss. So most people might relate, when I go to somewhere loud, like a bar or something, and people would be talking and I just zone out. And I couldn't hear what people were saying. And after asking 3 times, I just got sick of asking people. So I would very much just sit there and nod and I'd be like, yeah, no idea. I'd go on whole nights out and not spoken to anybody. I didn't really enjoy it. I felt overwhelmed. And I just thought that was me just not being able to hear.
And then you get a phone call the next day and like, where are you? And you're like, what do you mean? I said, you said you're coming out with us again. I was like, did I?
Didn't know what I was nodding to. Exactly. And so these things were just every day of my life and I was kind of bumbling through. And one day, the hearing was just depressing me. So I went privately to get a hearing aid. A hearing test. That's not what I meant to say. I went privately to get a hearing test and they obviously said, yeah, you need a hearing aid. You've got perforated eardrum. It's going to cost you $4,000 upwards. Let's go. Then I remembered I paid taxes. So I thought, right, I'm going to go NHS. So I went to the NHS and I got so fortunate because the doctor I was seen by one had a hearing aid, two was also neurodivergent. And so we did all these tests and all that jazz. So he was showing me the data on the screen. I don't know if anyone listening has had a hearing test before, but you see a series of graphs and they point out and they show you. And he said, actually, your hearing, with the exception of the sounds and like T and F,
yeah,
TH and F, he said your hearing's actually remarkably good. And I get, okay, well, I can see the science, but I'm not going to minimize my own experience. Why is it then I go in any loud room, that is the most overwhelming experience ever? Exactly. Yeah. Why is that my reality? And he goes, oh, I don't think you've got a hearing problem. I was like, right. He said, I think you've got an attention problem. Oh. And that for me was a big trigger. And it just triggered me to really start looking into everything. And I went private in the end because I'm still waiting in NHS for some medication. And so I spoke to somebody. And first of all, the hours consultation took us 4 hours. So that was just, she said, well, no shit. I got on there well. And so I went through this process and that really triggered me off. And that's kind of where I got to.
Yeah. So you don't think it was acquired from getting hit by a car? You think you had it already, but all of that other stuff kind of took you that way?
I think I've always had it. I think it very much highlighted things that I didn't realize were there, definitely amplified it, because it was like I had the concussion, then whatever I went back to, it really broke because there were other things that were just the concussion, but it really broke my normality. And I'm estranged from my father. I don't speak to him. Also childhood trauma, as most NDs do. But I did reach out just to say, look, this is what I'm going through. I'm going through this diagnosis. Can I just have a bit of family history? Is this something that's, in our family tree? The answer was yeah. I don't trust his words. So I said, can you just give me some indication of why you might think that? And he sent me this wall of, he's also got ADHD, a wall of information. And I found myself nodding along thinking, oh shit, I still do that now. And I just think, I could relate to all of it. Not necessarily the way that he framed it, but I could relate to it and still do it. So when I think about my childhood, when I think about the way I struggled socially or educationally or anything, I can see it. And when I got my diagnosis and I told everyone around me, I felt like I was like coming out as a neurodivergent. Nobody was surprised. Apparently I was the only one that didn't know that I was neurodivergent.
Yeah. So this glass was given to me by my cub pack when I stood down as the Arcala. And that was about 6 months after I got my diagnosis. And everybody else was like, no shit. So I was like, how did everyone get the memo but me?
You don't say, well, I wish you had. It might have made things a bit easier.
The other thing is that I still think there's a massive stigma around the label. Okay. And I think the TikTok generation are enabling women and girls specifically to be able to associate with the label differently to how historically men have. Because 5 years ago, if you thought of somebody who had ADHD, you'd be thinking comedian, actor, who's a man. There wasn't many prominent female ADHDers. And that's starting to change. Sue Perkins spoke about it in January, February. So there are more and more people being outwardly open about their labels, their diagnoses. So growing up, it was always those types of conversations of, will you sit still? Will you be quiet? Will you do as you're told? Because ADHD in the name is deficits and disorders, rather than trying to see the strengths in this person who's highly responsive, highly reactive, adaptable, who can change with the times. I had a really interesting conversation this morning about whether or not to disclose and at what point during an employment cycle should you disclose? And I think that the atmosphere, the culture that we're now talking about neurodiversity in is different now than it was 2 or 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That it is more prominent now than it has been. But then is that because it's a social phenomena that we're all talking about, so we notice it more, we perceive it more because we're paying attention to it? Or are we perceiving it more because it's actually more? And then,
go on.
No, go on.
So first of all, because there's a lot to unpack there, so I'm going to go back to the beginning part. And the beginning part was girls getting diagnosed later in life, because that's the reality. So when I spoke to my dad about it, he said that in the 90s he took me to get, because he's got it, my uncles have got it, my brother's got it, like different versions of neurodivergence. And when I was taken, I was sent away to say girls don't get ADHD. And we do experience it very differently. Like, I don't, like, part of it can be in hyperactivity, part of it can be inattentiveness, but for me, like, I much prefer the umbrella term of I've literally just forgotten it, cognitive functions, and struggling there. So with your memory, with your time, with your getting things done, doing things in order, prioritization, I think that's much more open and understanding of it. And I think the reason why, my age, I'm 33 this year, and later, for my second book, I'm interviewing a lot of people to get their experience. Most people I'm speaking to on average are 40 to 60. And it's because I think children now, while they're understanding it more, I think they should have more neurodivergent doctors, or whoever it is at that side, actually understanding it. Because if, not to use the term rigidly as in I believe it, it's just the only way for me to make my point. If you get too many neurotypicals as the one trying to figure out what's going on, if they're not having that lived experience, it's very hard to understand it.
Yeah.
So I think, while we might come on leaps and bounds in science and understanding, we're still not there yet. And unless you live it, everyone's version of ADHD, for example, is different, but we'll still have a lot of things that we'll kind of do similarly, or I do that too in my own way. And I think, the reason why as a female, I only got diagnosed last year is because just medical advancements.
Yeah.
And if we're still not at a point of understanding it, but we're understanding it a lot more, imagine what it was like, 30 years ago and beyond. And because of where we're at as a nation, we're seeing waiting lists of 2 years. People are having to self-diagnose. People are having to pay thousands of pounds to go to private, because if you do a ADHD diagnosis, then you've got to look at autism. Sometimes, like, there's dyslexia, maybe dyscalculia, dyspraxia, like there's crossover. And everything seems so siloed. There doesn't seem to be this one, okay, here are some neurodivergent traits. Let's see how that kind of relates to you. I think the system's still incredibly flawed. And I think even getting diagnosed is difficult. Part of what you said there is there are people jumping on the bandwagon. There always will be. Things like even the Me Too movement, you'll have genuine people with lived experience, and you'll have people that just want to water that down. And you have influencers and people out there that want to just say, oh, I've got ADHD, or I think I've got ADHD, because they want to seem relevant. And then you'll have people really struggling, and they don't even know that they have it yet. My friend Kim calls me the human ADHD detector, because I keep accidentally unmasking people because they'll talk to me, and
we tend to attract each other.
we do. We're the only ones that will listen to our clumsy communication styles,
or keep up with the conversation despite the tangents.
Which one? And exactly. And I think there's a lot to that question. People are still waiting. People, only just got diagnosed. I think there's a lot of advancement needed to get us to where we need to be.
And what does that utopia look like to you?
Where we need to be? I think it goes both ways. I think, so if I peel that back, first of all, I'm going to write that question down because I will forget. I think as somebody that is neurodivergent and somebody that isn't, I'm just going to call them neurodivergent and neurotypical just for ease. If people don't agree with those labels, it's not said to offend. It's just for me to be able to separate the two conversations. I don't think like a neurotypical. They don't think like me. I think there's an education part on both sides. So that neurotypical know that, actually I am going to think in this abstract way. And I saw an amazing meme, and the guy I'm dating at the moment pulled me up on it positively at the weekend. And he said, wow, your brain is so fast. And I said, I know. And this meme said it was like a dad was talking to the child who'd spilt the orange juice, and then scolded the child for being so absent-minded, for suddenly talking about the carnival. And he's like, why are you talking about a carnival? I'm trying to talk to you about some orange juice that you spilled. And the child said, well, the orange juice brought some wasps, and my cousin Jimmy or whatever got stung by a wasp last week at the carnival. And I was thinking about the carnival because, oh my God, do you remember how fun those rides were? And now I get that, because I'm like, yeah, I do that all the time. But a neurotypical person doesn't. And I think when we're able to unpick those thought processes and layers, and we can all start to see each other, even ourselves, even understand ourselves a little bit better. And that education piece, I think, is missing for sure. And that's what I do in a communication space.
So last week, I had the privilege to go and listen to Professor Simon Baron-Cohen and now fellow of Birkbeck University, Judy Singer, in Cambridge, on the evolution of neurodiversity as a movement.
Nice.
And one of the Q&A questions got a little bit political into the collectivism, communist, socialist ideology of each to their own need. And I like that, because that's where we are in healthcare. We have individualized care. Not everybody with a infected big toe has the same treatment. Some of them have antibiotics, some of them have it washed, some have it cut off, because you take the individual and understand what that individual needs to heal, to get better, to thrive. And we don't have, or we seldom have, person-centered people management in organizations. Team leaders don't turn around and say, hey, Sam, what do you need to be the best you can be at the job that you're doing? Oh, I would like to work from home 3 days a week because I find it easier to concentrate, or I find it harder to concentrate when I'm in a group environment, or whatever. And then having those conversations based on individual needs and individual traits, rather than it's my way or the highway. This is my management style. If you don't like my management style, leave. Or the one size fits some. But then on a line, how accommodating can you be? Because at some point in time, you might turn around and say, well, that request is unreasonable. And that's an ethical, moral debate within itself on the reasonableness test. So I would like to see a society where we can support each other on the basis of need, but potentially without the need for a label. So why can't we say, Alia really struggles with time management. Here is some tools, techniques, apps to enable you to be able to do the things that you struggle with. I'm not saying that you've got executive dysfunction and time blindness because of label. I'm saying that you've got a specific struggle for something that you want to be able to be better at.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't matter if you are autistic or ADHD or dyspraxic, dyscalculic, etc., 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 because you're looking at the specific trait and the specific challenge that you've got. And that then comes into that whole conversation of social versus medical model of neurodiversity. Is it siloed on the diagnosis front because it's the medical model? Hey, I'm a specialist in this thing, so I can only diagnose you in this thing, so come and see me and I can talk to you about this thing. But co-occurrence is the rule rather than the norm. So you're highly likely to have another neurodiverse condition if you have one.
Yeah.
So having a more rounded approach to say, actually, you're ADHD with autistic traits, but you're not autistic because you don't meet the criteria to click over the threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Or here or spiky profiles. Here are some things that you're really good at, and here's some things that you're not so good at. And then being able to be in a supportive world where it doesn't matter what the labels are, it matters what you're good at and what you're not good at, and how society can help you with the things that you struggle with.
It would be good to get there. We are not even close. And
I did call it utopia.
I had a conversation with my therapist lately. I pick things back up with her, so she helps me with like ADHD to just talk things through. And we had this conversation where, because when it affects people on a psychological level as well, because when you start to fragment yourself off, so I'm Alia, I am woman, I am also woman with ADHD, I am also woman with autism. When you fragment yourself like that, you are then not fully accepting of yourself, which has its own consequence on your mental health. And you cannot show up as a full you every time you need to section yourself out. And that's a completely different space. And that affects everything. That affects your communication, that affects your relationships, that affects your interpersonal relationships with others. It affects your self-esteem, and it's massive. But when you try and have those conversations, I mean, I can only speak to my experience. I try and do that. And I try and say to people, oh, listen, do you mind if we have a video call? Because I struggle with a voice call. Can we do this? Because my need is this. Can we do this to accommodate? And people, and this is where this education piece I feel is so important. People will just like be so quick to dismiss me or just shut me down because it's inconvenient for them, or like if there's no real reason, if they have their own need that counterbalances, I get it. But if there's no real reason, can I just pick up the phone because I'm driving? Okay, well, I've got ADHD and I struggle. Okay, yeah, fine. I'm happy to accommodate your needs now. So it's like we can't transcend above labels because we're in a space where labels actually make people listen. Yeah. So I would love to be able to stop saying it. Like, I don't mind. Like, I'm not against labels fully, unless they're used as weapons or as an excuse. Because for me, I think my own space is that a label allows me to understand something. A label gives me a direction. Oh, okay, ADHD. Let me go on to every single ADHD group I can on Instagram, follow them all, and go and sit in the comment section, see what everybody else says. Oh, now I feel okay. Now I feel less alone. Now I feel like
validated. Yeah,
validated. Like my experience is valid. I'm not weird. I'm just like somebody else.
A little bit weird. I'm a little bit weird. I'm not calling you weird.
But I'm not alone in my weirdness, and I think that loneliness is something that somebody that is undiagnosed or new in their diagnosis can face a lot. I certainly did, and that label was my comfort. It wasn't an excuse to say, oh, okay, I can just quit now. I've got ADHD. It's like, okay, how can I get my best quality of life understanding this? But then to transcend my own label, to get out of that space of I get myself now, I want to go back into the real world. There's always a barrier unless it's like my little, if you go to the theme park and you show that you've got a disability, you can jump the queue. It's like I have to prove my need to have my needs met. And I feel like in this utopia that you speak of, exactly, smashing through that. And again, I think, I just keep circling to it because this is my niche, but it's all about communication, because communication isn't just what you say. It's about what you hear as well. And when I talked about understanding things from people's sides, whether you're neurotypical, neurodivergent, or whatever label we want to use, until we break through those barriers, people aren't going to see it as a problem in the first place. So when you say, is that a reasonable request to make? We need to be open-minded. That does dip into everything. That dips into culture, and I'm not going to talk about gender or any different party. I think we need to understand each other better to be able to do that.
Well, and a lot of that also comes down to understanding ourselves and understanding our whole selves, not the bit of ourselves that we've become because we're comfortable there. Mm-hmm. I know lots and lots and lots of people who profess bringing their full selves, but don't want to admit this dark stuff. Mm-hmm. Well, how can you ask others to show up
when you don't?
If only 80% of you's there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that whole conversation of intersectionality and identities it is potentially a really useful conversation to debate. Of can you be Alia, who's a woman with ADHD and a business owner and a coach and all at the same time? I think the answer is yes.
Well, I am.
And does it serve you or anyone you're communicating with to be any of the subsets of that? So a conversation I had this morning was on disclosing and whether you should disclose during the interview process. I've moved on this in the last year. If I disclose during the interview process and you don't accept me, then you weren't ever going to accept me if I was successful. So there's no loss to me because I've been honest. As if I'd masked and got through the process and got given a job, within a couple of years, you would see the holes in me. You'd realize I wasn't the person you interviewed. So I'm doing myself a disservice by hiding.
Yeah.
But there are lots and lots of people out there that aren't ready to disclose, aren't ready to come to terms with what it means for them.
I think I'd like to touch on that. And I think that really does go back to what you're saying about knowing oneself. So kind of with my communication philosophy, it's a 4-pillar approach. And the first pillar is awareness. And the more you do know yourself, the more confidence you can have with that. Or to add to that story, I was looking for a VA because one of my therapists' piece of advice was, if you broke your leg, you would not beat yourself up for not being able to walk your dog. You would just get a dog walker. So why not just identify those bits within you that you're not, I basically just can't do as good. Let's not beat around the bush. I'm shit at doing it.
Everything you hate doing, you're probably not very good at.
The things that take me 20 million times slower than anybody else, and give that to somebody else and just go do those things I'm really great at. She said you wouldn't beat yourself up with a physical broken leg. So why is it just because it's your mind that you are fighting this thing? Just don't do it. To pay someone else. And I was like, all right. So I got a VA, and when I was looking, she told me she thought she had ADHD too. Now that I don't mind saying, that made me go, first of all, I leant back. And the reason I leant back was because it's my ADHD that makes me need some help. So I'm like, okay, well, let's discover your traits, because one of my things is that my brain moves so fast, and I get like, I had a whole cry about this. I got the days of the week in the wrong order, not because I don't know the days of the week in the right order, but by the time I've run through saying them in my head and my mouth opens, so I said Monday, Tuesday, Sunday, because my brain was already at Sunday. I'd done Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday in my head, that every time I said a word, I said Sunday. Right. And time blindness is just not my thing. And the first thing I do every morning, if it's not in the diary, I don't do it. I forgot. First thing I do every morning is I set all my alarms. I have pre-alarms. I have 15 minutes before. I have 10 minutes before if I have to leave the house. I have get ready, leave. You should have left by now. Get out the house. I have lots of alarms. Yeah. And it was important to me. It wasn't a discerning factor, the fact that she did or didn't have ADHD. It was her traits. Because if her traits showed up like my traits, that's a disaster, because you're here to fix that gap in me. We can't both have that gaps. But if your gap is a hyper focus on detail, where you are a stickler for times, you are always early, you know the days of the week and you can say them out loud, then okay, we can both have ADHD, right? Like, it's not the labels, I think it's the traits. And exactly like you say, if you go to a job where you need to be detail orientated and you just can't see the details in your own work, there's no shame in that. Some people, for me, I'm so grateful. I don't really have too much fear, and more so like, what is it? It's like a danger switch. Some people like the safety of a job. I like not having the stress of things, but I know if my entire business fell apart today, I'd be back and doing something else tomorrow. I'd land on my feet. Some people need the security of work. And so that they let that need for security drive them. Oh, I need to lie, I need to mask, I need to hide. And all of this is just, like you say, it's awareness. It's unpicking back all of the parts of you. It's really sitting with yourself and saying, okay, this is how I show up. It doesn't matter if you're messy and you're always late. Find a situation that allows for your messy lateness.
Or set a time an hour early, so when you're late, you're on time.
That don't work. I turn it off and then I forget I turned it off.
So what I do for appointments that I need to be out of the house for, is I'll diarise in the calendar exactly where I need to be when. So if I need to be in London at 2, I'll have in my calendar, you're catching the 10:42. and then in the diary it'll be 10 o'clock, you need to leave to go and catch the 10:42.
Me too. I do the same thing. I do it for the airport. I do it when I've got things right. This is where you need to do it. You got this tram now, you've got this, get a taxi. I'm the same.
And then you get into London and then your brain melts because you haven't looked at the tube app.
And I usually, if I do things like I'll put what I need to remember. So the other day, this is so dumb. I picked up a book to put away, and as I was leaving, and normally I pick up my notepad to go, and by the time I got to the meeting, I still had the book because
you never picked up the new notepad.
Because in my head, my hand was busy. But I didn't think about what it was, and so if I I'm just thinking out loud. But if I need to take my passport somewhere, oh my God, the amount of times I have to remind myself to take my passport to the airport. So it's like, you need these documents, you need this thing, and I put it all in the diary to just remember, because my brain isn't going to remember. So I stopped beating myself up about it and just made things as obvious as possible that I just need to take on this information now.
But the great saying, you don't know what you've lost until it's gone. We packed up to go camping with the Cubs and Scouts just before the pandemic. I must have walked back in the front door after driving off the driveway 4 times. And it was like, all we need.
I went on a camping weekend this weekend with my new beau and forgot my hiking boots.
So you walked in trainers, or
no,
you
I had to buy new ones?
Okay.
Which is, I think, something else that we don't talk about.
Or the ADHD tax.
Is the cost of being neurodivergent. Oh my God, the amount of fines I get. Even I've had fines that thankfully sometimes I get away with it, sometimes I don't, where I have bought the ticket on my phone, thank God, gone to the machine, walked off. I forgot to put the ticket on the car. I paid for it. It's not on the car though. And it cost me a fortune. It cost me 100 quid this weekend in hiking boots, because then you're in the lakes and obviously there's no Sports Direct around. I got a TV license thing through the door the other day, because I don't actually use the TV. I just forgot I used the app once, and I'm like, we've seen you on BBC iPlayer, and I was like, oh, I forgot to do that. Yeah.
So that's why we need to register. They're monitoring us.
But at the time I was like, oh, I need to pay for the license, and then I didn't, and then I just forgot. And then I got even that bill that made me cry last week. I just forgot, because they have a really stupid process, and for me, everyone's brain's different, but I need to be able to do things, because if I come against a wall, I'll forget to do it. There was a glitch with the DVLA website for my driver's license that it actually turned out it had my middle name on it, and I didn't realize. So Alia Coster wasn't working, and so every time I'd go through the system, I'd ring up and they say, no, you can't do it over the phone, you've got to do it on the system. Every time I go through the system says no access. I get distracted. It took me 18 months to change my driver's license, because in the end I just had a whole patio down the phone, and finally got somebody that would listen, and I had at least £3,000 in fines because they couldn't find my house. And that's just great. That £3,000 could have been something productive.
That could have been a nice holiday.
Could have been a lovely holiday. Could have been lots of holidays. And it wasn't. It was all on fines. And then I had, actually, with one of my businesses, one of my suppliers, I just forgot to pay. And I was like, oh, here you go. And they said, oh, we're thinking of changing it so that you can't do that. And I said, oh, I'm sometimes a bit slow. I always pay. I've got 2 years of records. And they said, oh, we just can't allow for it. And then I had to pull out the label card. I was like, can I speak to your neurodiversity team? who is there that deals with these sensitive issues? Because I do struggle to remember. The money's there. Your systems don't allow for these flaws. And this is the thing. If we know that these issues that a lot of us face with, maybe businesses can build systems that are a bit more flexible.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many accommodations are NT friendly.
Yeah.
It's like, it's really helpful that I can talk to a human. Who would have thunk? But no, my last fine was going over the Dartford crossing. I put in the registration of the car, but got the last 2 digits the wrong way around.
Yeah.
So I was like, I paid for it. I've got the receipt for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they were like, well, here's a photo of you going over the bridge. This isn't the same license plate. And I'm like, the time of my transaction is exactly the same time that we crossed the fucking bridge. Mm-hmm. And you can see that I made the mistake. Okay, I made a mistake. Yeah, well, the license plates don't match.
Did they accommodate it or no?
Well, so it was with a hire car company as well. So they were like, oh, we've paid your fine. You owe me 60 quid. And I was like, A, you shouldn't have paid the fine because I paid it. And B, I'm not paying you 60 quid because I didn't make a mistake. Oh, I didn't pay for the trip.
It was a mistake that can't be helped. And I think it's so stupid because I have the same thing. I have things like that all the time, and the listeners will have things like that all the time. And because we have taken the action we believe to be right at the time, and you forgot about it, you've moved on. And then you're like called to be accountable for something that was months or whatever ago. My thousands of pounds, a lot of that was Dartford. Yeah. I forgot. And it's things like these systems that make it a lot easier for people. Oh, you can just pay online now. Don't go through the toll. Just do it within the next 48 hours.
Yeah, but then object permanence. Well, there's not a sign here saying pay dart charge.
even if there is, I forget.
It's gone. And then attention deficit. We went to Brighton for the day, drove down, and decided to drive back through the city because then I could show the kids that there's Big Ben and stuff on a Sunday. 4 weeks later, you owe us 80 quid. What do I owe you 80 quid for? Well, because you turned left at Waterloo, you went into the congestion zone and you didn't pay your congestion charge. And I was like, I didn't even know that the border was there. So yeah, I get that.
There is a true tax that people don't talk about. There's obviously the obvious stuff of fleeting hobbies and ideas that we thought we were so into, but it's expensive. It's expensive being different, and it shouldn't be.
Absolutely. So what got you into content writing, or the written form? What drew you? Yeah, what got you into writing?
I'll try not to give too much context on that because I don't know how much time we've got left.
That's fine. You got as much as you want.
As in true ND fashion, I fell into it. So I used to co-own a Muay Thai gym in Thailand, which I accidentally fell into because I went traveling for 6 weeks and never went home. Okay. As one does. And I felt I had to leave because it's quite funny, actually. I don't know if you've ever owned a business in Thailand before. So, that lack of danger signal thing I told you about? No, it's so prevalent when I travel. And so I just fell into this, and then I accidentally had to pay a bribe. Otherwise, I was threatened to be put in a Thai prison, even though I hadn't done anything wrong. But not the kind of thing you want to battle. So I parted with my money, and I just thought, oh crap, now I've got to move on, because once you pay a bribe, you're gonna have to pay bribes forever. And all it was he said I had the wrong visa, and I said no, I didn't. I showed him the visa. He said, okay, wrong visa, come with me. Wasn't the wrong visa. But when the chief of police is saying come with me or pay me money, those are your two options.
Yeah.
So I thought, I was 26. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want to tell any of my friends. I was just like, I'd already isolated myself anyway. And I was like, cool, stuck in Thailand. What do I do? So like any millennial, I Googled my problem. And
And it said, become a writer, pay me £1,000 to go on this writing course.
Well, no, I went through my options.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to, I was 26. I was like, I want something real. I want my own thing. I want to be a grown up now. I don't want to flip flop through my career. I don't want to work for somebody else because I don't generally like bosses. I'm not very good with being told what to do. And yeah, so it was kind of twofold, really. Okay, you could be a TEFL, so you could teach English. And I was like, not that there's anything wrong with it. I was like, I don't want to do that because that's what everybody does. And I thought, well, what are my skills? I drew a golden line through all the things I'd ever done, and writing was one of them. I'm incredibly fast at typing, and I'm very. You tell me something. I can't type and listen to music. The first Penguin published book I ever wrote for one of my clients, when I was writing it, I would read it back and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And I realized they were lyrics. Because as I was writing, like my thoughts just flow into my fingertips, but then so does everything I hear. And so I will just write out sentences of things that I've heard, not realizing that that's what I'm doing. So I Googled and I was like, well, I can type. Maybe I'll be a typist. And I found this internship to be a writer in the south of Thailand for free. You didn't have to pay £1,000. It was not paid nor paid for. You got fed twice a day, so I was super skinny. It was great. And you learn how to write. And you lived in this house 1 street away from the beach. And it was brilliant. It was so cool. We had journalists come in, we had authors come in, and you learn, and you were essentially slave labor. You were working all hours of the day, but I didn't mind because I loved it. I was good at it. And I kind of looked at the business model and just thought, I could just do this better myself. So I did. And one thing I've always been really good at in my career, despite being 32, I've actually worked for 2 decades. So I started working for my dad when I was 12. I started my first shop for my dad when I was 14. When I was 15, so I was avoiding being at home. I had 5 jobs. 16, I had 3 jobs in college. Started my first business at 21. So, you know, I'm nearly at retirement age by now. But in that time, building relationships, like building networking ones, rubbish at romantic ones. Building workplace relationships I've always been really good at. So I looked at this business model. I started off as a writer, just a freelance writer, set up the worst WordPress website in the world. How I ever made money off that, I have no idea. My marketing understanding has got a lot better in the last 6 years. And that was it. And I just pushed off and I started off as a freelance writer. And that was 6 years ago next month.
And then that's developed into you having guest writers and editors on salary and doing lots and lots of other cool things with the stuff.
They're all stuff, yeah. So within 8 months, I started hiring, and I went up to 10 staff at one point, which is to me way too overwhelming. It was lots of learning curves. So there's 3 of us now, and I'm happy with that size. And that was what then triggered my second arm of the business, which is the coaching arm. So when I was getting CVs come through, and writing is something I'm very good at. Since I started, it just made sense. It's like when I look at something, it like pulses red, and I can see it's wrong, and I understand it's wrong. And my hyper focus is communication, basically. Some people get trains, I got words, and so when I was getting CVs coming in and they were applying for the job, some of them were really crap, awful. And if you were applying to, not that it's a problem, but if you're applying to stack shelves at Sainsbury's, for example, you could be a bit more forgivable if being able to sell yourself wasn't really a skill set. It's not needed. But when it came to writing, you think you'd have one job. You think you might be able to do this okay. And I have a very solution orientated brain, so I try to fix things that are broken, which is why I didn't date for a very long time. And I was just like, why is it that this is happening? And it sent me on such a journey, and I loved it. And what I realized was most of us will go to school, and we might go to uni. I didn't. At best, we'll get academically trained on how to put words together. But then nobody teaches us how to navigate different personalities. Nobody teaches us how to give bad news tactfully, good news humbly, how to be persuasive, how to show empathy in the written form. And bearing in mind, like, computers and the internet only come in the last couple of decades. Anyone a bit older, we were just used to being, well, not we, a few years above, they would be used to just doing everything and either writing a letter or face to face. And so there's this massive fundamental skills gap that we all need, unless you're working solely with your hands and you never have any communication with anybody else. You need to be able to communicate effectively to not only get by, have a good quality of life, and be able to achieve what it is. If you're a business owner, your business is not going to be successful if you are a poor communicator, and you are relying on your own communication skills.
Yeah.
So I just unraveled all that, really, and realized there's so many layers of communicating more effectively. Then I wrote my book, do my coaching, and of course realized that I actually have extra layers that other people struggle with and some people don't.
Yeah. But do you also think that society needs to be more accommodating to those people who have challenge in communication?
Because of my first pillar being awareness, I think when you learn the skills essentially, like properly, actually it transcends most labels. And the reason of that is what we said is being able to unpick things down to their absolute root. So the things that make us communicators are personality styles, values, goals, fears. I said personality style, but also communication style. And when you pull that apart, neurodivergent or not, it's being able to see, one, it goes both ways. It's knowing it yourself and being able to learn how to, do I use a different tool out of my toolkit right now? And it's also knowing that it exists. So let me just take that a bit deeper. I did a post recently on my LinkedIn. I do have it up, so I am reading it. I did a post on my LinkedIn recently, and it was crazy. I had nearly 15,000 people connected with it.
Was that your 8 fingers?
Yeah. That's what we're going to go through. And it's crazy. And not everybody thinks that way, but we don't realize that there are people that think like us, there are people that don't. So some of the extra layers that we're talking about here are things like sending walls of text, endlessly talking about something. People will find around you that they can't get a word in edgeways. All of the context, because you need to tell the story that inspired the story to be able to explain the story to then actually tell the actual story. Interrupting people with questions because what they're saying is so interesting, and going off on tangents. Now, most people listening might relate to all of those, but it's important to know that not everybody does all those things. And for me, because I've been single for quite a while, I'm finally dating someone that seems worth it. We'll see how that goes by the time this goes live. But I've been single a long time, and because dating is very much online and dating apps, I find dating the easiest way to look at these things. And when you're speaking to someone who will just say, "Hi, you okay?" and you're like, "Oh," and you've got so much to say, and you'll send them loads, and then they'll not pick up on any of it, and then you find like you're doing all the work. That's both people have a responsibility, neurotypical or not, to be able to understand the different complexity of conversation anyway, but understand, okay, well, actually not everybody talks in walls of text. So if you find comfort in saying everything, to somebody else that might be really overwhelming. If you're endlessly talking, like you and I have done it a bit today, I've identified where a different set of people having the same conversation could probably say it in less. Doesn't mean they go as deep as us, doesn't mean they've enjoyed it as much. They just have a different communication style. With the context, some people don't care, and they don't need the context. They kind of got it, they figured it out. And And then the interrupting thing is so important because hijacking is something that's so critical. When you recognize that there are different ways to skin a cat, really. Please don't skin cats. But do you know what I mean? Like, we'll use a different analogy. I hate that one. So you can come up with 6 a number of ways. 3 plus 3. Most people might be a 3 plus 3. I might be a 2 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1. We still came up with 6. But understand that everybody does different maths to get to the same way sometimes.
Yeah.
Can't remember your original question. People with neurodiversity, is it harder? I think when you know that there are different ways and you know the different styles and you understand different ways, it doesn't matter if they're doing it because they're ADHD or just because they ask loads of questions. I think it goes deeper than, do we need to be more aware to people that have those extra complexities? I think it's being aware of what all the complexities could be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, the reason I asked the question was going back to your CV anecdote.
Yeah.
Are people not selling themselves as well as they could sell themselves because you're holding them to a non-neurodivergent standard?
Mm-hmm.
Was the beginning of that conversation journey. It's fine.
But neurodivergent can still learn that skill set. I don't think that's just a communication thing. That's not a personal, because nobody told us how to write a CV. Nobody said this is who you are. They just give you a list of adjectives. I'm hardworking, I'm professional, I'm good in teams. It's all bullshit. That's not a real thing. Yeah, like that's just how the world learned how to write a CV. What does that actually mean? Your version of hardworking might be different to mine. I wish I said a different word. That felt like a personal attack.
Yeah, I work much harder. I had a really good chat with somebody in workplace conflict space last week or two, and he left a big corporate job. He was group HR director of an organization of more than 10,000 people. He was a big player in the HR space, and went independent, doing his own consulting. And he was like, the flexibility is fantastic, unmatched. I love working for myself because I can do what I want to do when I want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, well, when I talk to other people about starting to be self-employed or they're still thinking about being self-employed, he said, well, the thing about flexibility is it goes both ways. You see, I have the flexibility to be where I want when I want, but it also means that I can work my 100 hours a week wherever I want to. Yeah, because you are working 2 or 3 times as hard because you are everything rather than being a cog in a massive machine. You are the machine. So yeah, that kind of hit home quite hard. That it's amazing how much work I've done since being in substantive employment.
Yeah,
because you have to have that drive to keep going, and you don't have the paycheck coming at the end of the month if you're 80% good or 60% good. You have to keep going, which can be a drain.
That was exhausting.
So talk to me about big takeaways. What would you want the audience to know that you might have an insight that they might not yet have? What's the one thing that you would give them as a gift?
So this awareness piece around communication and overcoming all those challenges. So if any of the 8 things I said are kind of related, that's exactly what I help. I help understand that, be aware of it, and how to have tools in their toolkit. One that most people will do, and a really good freebie I've got, is understanding things when we're hijacking conversations. So if you think you can relate to it, feel free to reach out, because they can help you kind of overcome that. Because we're already sensitive to rejection, right? And if you're doing these things unsuccessfully, you're going to feel like you're not very good at socializing, so you're going to isolate yourself, which is not nice. But you're going to feel rejected, which we already know that feels horrible. We're going to feel trapped. We're going to have this ongoing shame of guilt and ongoing cycle of shame and guilt of, I'm just not going to talk, I'm too much. Nobody's too much anything. To speak to different people. It's being able to know when it's okay to talk for 6 hours about one thing, and when you've only got 30 minutes to have a Zoom call, how you pick what's important. So if anyone's struggling with those things, that's how I can help them. But one thing, just as a really easy giveaway, is most people will find that they will hijack communications a lot. And what that looks like is if someone's telling a story, maybe you said something and I've just taken it. This conversation has been, you've been saying something, even if you just make a statement, I then relate to that statement and we talk about that one thing. You might say something, I'll pick one bit that I like and just go off in a complete tangent, and that tangent never comes back, and I'm the one doing all the talking, whereas it was your story. That is hijacking somebody else's communication. Now, first of all, there's no shame in doing it. We need to learn a better way, but if that is somebody listening, don't worry, we all do it. I need to keep myself in check because I do this a lot. The reason we do it is because often that's our way to show empathy. So empathy, this is so layered. This isn't the only way. Sometimes it's a nervous thing, but most times it's an empathy thing. So for me, even though I think abstractly, unless it's empathy related, I cannot read between the lines. Oh my God, just be direct. Tell me what you actually meant, because there could be 20 million translations and I don't know which one to pick. So tell me what you want. So if you're telling me a story, whether or not I can relate to it, what I will do is tell a story back. And what I'm trying to do in that time is get a buy-in from you that, yeah, that's what I meant. So if you were to tell me you had, an experience this weekend, and it's not something I can really put myself in the shoes of, but it sounds like something I know, I might say, oh, this happened to me. Is this the same kind of thing? You say, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, great, I get it. But then I carry on talking and I then go into the context of my thing. And then you just don't get a word in edgeways. That is what a hijacked conversation looked like. And for me, the reason I started doing that was because I was trying to show you that I care. I'm listening. I'm in the trenches with you. I get it. I just didn't check myself, and now I've buggered off. So what starts off as a really caring thing to do, how we stay in that moment, is we learn how to bookend ourselves. So first of all, I might say something like a statement, say, not quite, I've not experienced that, but it sounds like something I know. Can I just check with you it's the same thing? And then, or whatever, that's just me. Then I say my story, and once you give me that buy-in, then I can say, okay, sounds good, carry on. Give the conversation back. Most people forget it wasn't their conversation, and then they bugger off.
or you then got the statement, why do you always make these conversations about you? Hang on a minute. I'm not. I'm trying to be here for you, talking to you about the challenges that you're currently talking about. And just because I've related to it doesn't all of a sudden make me the narcissist.
Well, there's two things on that. And that's so important that you say that, because this goes back to what we've said about having to understand each other no matter which side. Because sometimes you might be. And I don't mean you. I mean,
more often than not, I might be.
The reality is, and this is a harsh reality, sometimes you might be. It doesn't make you narcissistic, but that's what you're doing. And you're doing it from a place of love, because exactly as you said, you're just trying to relate. If somebody is saying that to you, not always, because it might just be that they're just being a bit selfish. If somebody is saying that to you, it might be an indicator that you are hijacking people. And that's where you can say, okay, a tool that I could get used to is, rather than saying, I've got ADHD, I interrupt, sorry, I'll try my best. You can just say, it's my way to relate to you. It helps me to be able to understand if this is the same story, and then please feel free to move on so that we can both show up. So if you are hearing that, it's an indicator. Maybe just slightly tweak your approach and remember to give it back.
Yeah. Words of sage advice from somebody who is wiser than I.
Only in comms.
But that's the whole point. It's I'm only an expert in like the third most important thing of existing. Are you breathing? Are you hydrated? Are you speaking to other humans? So my last substantive role was fundamentally needs-based communication, but with the lens of conflict at work. And one of our lead trainers were like, there's like 3 things that we're never taught. One of those is breathing. Mm-hmm. It's like, how many times have you just started speaking and then you've got 4 words to say?
Yeah.
Because your brain was like, I'm going to get all this out, and you don't. And then it just makes it look like you're rushing because you haven't thought to, use punctuation or inhale. So, because of my lived experience and training in that space, personally, I think that there is a challenge for me as an ADHDer in implementing skills. I know the skills. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've lived and breathed the skills for a decade. But when the atmosphere is up to 11 and your back's against a wall, maybe I'm going to say something that I wouldn't normally say. Maybe I'm going to say it in a way that isn't as helpful as it could be. Mm-hmm. And sometimes being with people who are empathetic to that can help. Yeah. Because we're not our best selves every day. And
but don't get me wrong, I still have clashes. I just know why I'm clashing.
or at least you an hour and a half later, you're like, why did I do that? So the amount of times that you said something and thought, just why? Just shut up. Why?
I literally had a cry a few weeks ago. So I went to a comedy show. I sat right at the front and I kept blurting. My thoughts were just blurting out and I didn't even want to say it. And I was so embarrassed. And I just had to say to the guy, sorry, I've got ADHD. Please move on.
Did you shout out, was that meant to be funny?
No, I wasn't rude. I was just, it was like I was trying to be the funny one. Do you know what I mean? It was just my intrusive thoughts and I wasn't trying to intrude because I'm very dry, very sarcastic. So I was just kind of adding in, but in my head, but out loud. And I wasn't trying to do that. But go on, sorry, you were saying, because I have something to say to what you just said.
I don't know. I'm waffling. I was just about to pick up another thread of the conversation on rudeness and the perception of rudeness, but you jump in with something and I'll come back to it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna write that down so I don't forget. So first of all, you said about implementation and remembering in the moment, and I think what would be more valuable than trying to remember all the tools to do in the moment is have some safety mechanics ready. So first of all, when you're in this situation, when you can, I have a notepad and pen constantly because you are talking. We both have ADHD, right? We both talk a lot. So sometimes instead of just making your point and stopping, which is fine because I can keep up, but a neurotypical conversation might be a slower, methodical point. I'll write my points down so I don't interrupt, so I can circle back. So if you're in a meeting, if you're in a physical meeting with someone, just take a notepad, just write things down so you don't forget. So you're not interrupting all the time because you can't, okay, I can come back to that. Because some of it's wanting to talk at that moment. Some of it's wanting to say your thing because it's ready as a blurt. Some of it's, oh, fuck, I don't want to forget my point. Write it down quickly so you are actually listening. I record all my phone calls with my clients now so that I can be in the moment and reflect back to stuff later so I don't forget. But what you said there, which is, I think, really important for conflict, saying things that you don't want to say when your back's against the wall, when you switch on to 11, is being able to have a few phrases ready that you can either have in your phone. just don't worry about everyone else. Get your phone out, read the sentence until it becomes habit, where you can just stop. I'm sorry, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. Can we take 5 and come back to it? Can I leave the room? I'm not going to say my best thing. I work better writing things down. Can I go articulate my thoughts, write them, come back to you? Whatever you need to stop that conversation, you are not obligated in any space, unless you're probably in a courtroom, to have that conversation there and then. And if you are not somebody that can do that eloquently in that moment, you have permission to say not right now. Not no, because people are allowed to have their say. If it's a relationship and a partner wants to talk to you and they have a grievance and it's important that they have their needs met too, you're not saying, no, I don't want to hear you, I can't take this. You're saying, I want to hear you, but this second is not going to work. You have your needs, I have my needs. Let's do it in a space that we can both meet each other's needs.
So my I agree with you. And my biggest challenge is with the phrase, between action and reaction, there's a pause.
Mm-hmm.
In my ADHD brain, there is seldom a pause. So even having that ability to say, I need to stop here.
You don't have that internal, I need to stop.
Because I've lived with my back against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every week has been a fight for 30 odd years. Mm-hmm. I haven't had the chance to slow down. So it is very, very, very hard. You know, I have to work mentally very, very, very hard. Just to get to a position of, I need a break from this because this conversation can't continue the way it's continuing. Mm-hmm. So much so that I've got up and walked out of conversations just because I need to break the conversation, but I don't have the words to use. So at least you're distancing.
You're noticing the break to be able to stop that bit. And this is where communication gets messy, because communication is painful. Yeah. If communication is all led by awareness, it means we have to be aware, neurodivergent or not, to be a better communicator. Yeah. And, you know, I've been through trauma. I think you might have been through trauma. Everyone has been through their own version of trauma, some more, some less. It doesn't matter. But everyone's journeys are unique to them. And, you know, what that tells me is if that's something that you have lived with, unfortunately, that's now your job to be able to identify those triggers. Now, don't, like, not that you're minimizing yourself, but to be able to walk out of a room, that's not the best way to deal with it, but you're still dealing with it. So you are, something within you is you have this space. So maybe how you can deal with that, if this is with new people, something is triggering you need to figure that out. If this is in the same client, the same relationship, the same friend, be able to have that conversation with them. Say, look, sometimes when I feel like this is what's going on. So if I just need to walk out the room, please know I will come back. So you are, you know, this is how we speak our needs to the people around us a lot. You know, the person at Morrison's, if you've had a bad day and you flip, all right, probably wasn't the best. Maybe you go back and say sorry, but these things happen. If it's someone that you're in contact with a lot, you can communicate. Like my team know, I am so direct sometimes. I don't really know how to say. I'm really good at writing words because I can repeat, I can delete and
you can curate them.
Curate them. I can't curate my spoken words. You know, I'm a communication expert in the written form. I understand spoken, but I'm so, like, I've still got my own progresses to make, and I'm so blunt and direct. And sometimes I say, listen, just what I'm about to say, listen to the words, not the delivery. And
well, especially for those of us who are renowned for being sarcastic, people find me disingenuous. I'm not being disingenuous. This is just how I sound.
Well, this goes into your rudeness and your perception, right? Where you can, and this goes into rudeness, perception, knowing yourself, this awareness. If you know these things about you, it's okay to preset a conversation. Sometimes if I go onto a Zoom call and I can feel myself spiky today and I'm interrupting a lot, I'll just say, look, I have a habit to interrupt. I've been doing it a lot today. If I do it to you, it's not personal. If you like, there's no one way of doing things. There's no one tool I can't magically, well, you're not broken, so it's not a fix, but there's no silver bullet for me to say, here, Richard, if you do this, you're going to smash every personality, every conversation, because it's just not going to happen. But if you know different things that you can do, and you can say, right, I know I'm having a spiky day today, and I know I keep interrupting, or I know, oh my God, I don't stop talking everything I'm doing today. When you go into your next interaction, you don't have to go on about it, but you can just you can prelude.
Look, you can bookend it.
You can book it. Hey, listening.
Let's frame that.
You can bookend it, and like I have never met, and I've been doing it a lot more. I've been practicing, and I'm something you said earlier about only showing some parts. I'm my full ugly self. Like there's so much brightness and goodness in me. There's a lot of like trauma in there as well, and I will say I don't mind. Because I've healed from it. I can say, look, I've come from a traumatic childhood. I'm all right about it because it's the cost of me being me, and I'm fine with that. But I don't dwell on it. I'm not trauma responding. I'm not, giving everybody my whole life story. We ain't got time for that. But it's okay to say these things. And, the onus is then on somebody else. If it's going to be a difficult conversation, if you have told them you're going to walk out the room and you walked out the room and they don't like it, well, that's their fault because you tried to communicate. That's a different thing. So with dipping into the rudeness perception, which you haven't even asked me yet, but I'm going to answer it anyway. I think, first of all, being able to really sit with yourself and peel back what makes you you and how you react in different times of stress, not just negative. How do you react when you're happy? Like this poor new guy I met him when I wasn't expecting it. So he's had my whole self, my unmasked self, and we found a happy rhythm now. Oh my God, I wouldn't shut up when we met. And he's been great with me, and I just talked him through, and he's obviously neurotypical and he tries to get it, and he does. But I just say, I'm feeling like this today, or I'm doing this today. And he does the same. And people have moods, people have emotions, whether they're heightened or not. But don't feel afraid to not disclose something, because actually it would help more than it hinders.
Honesty is always the best policy. It's all about tact.
I was going to say, how are you applying that tact?
Look, the reason the saying is the truth hurts is because it does.
Yeah, of course it does.
So just going back to your comedy blurts and the perception that you asking if it was fun, me putting words in your mouth and you saying, no, you wouldn't be that rude.
Mm-hmm.
And then saying that you're blunt and direct and you like to draw the line so you know where the line is. Where's the line between direct communication and rudeness?
Question? Very good question. Well, for me personally, because I do not struggle with some blindness that people might in terms of what's appropriate. So do I look fat in this outfit? Yeah.
You don't look fat, by the way. I'm not.
No. If somebody asked you a question, do I look fat in this outfit? The truth might be yes. A tactful way of saying it might be saying, it's not your cut, not your colour. Is there a different size? And that, I think that comes into there are skills in that. I think I think it works on different levels, because I'm trying to think of, because I don't struggle with what I know other neurodivergents will, with that whole emotion. I think this might be more on the ASC spectrum, emotion and logic. The reason I say I'm not rude is because everything I do is do with intent, even though I'm blunt and direct. I even say to myself, well, I don't mind saying, me and my team member, it wasn't even an argument. We had our second spat in 5 years the other day because he did something 3 times I didn't agree with. And, I am the boss. It's my job to point it out. And it was like, well, they're not even that big a deal. I said, it's like a moldy apple in a barrel. If you let that moldy apple fester and rot, the whole barrel gets infected. If you take that out, the rest of the barrel's fine. That's my job as your leader, to point out when you aren't, being that standard that, I hold yourself to, you hold yourself to. It's my job to get the best out of you. And so it is a big deal because it is important. And when we were talking, he got a bit upset. I was like, we had 2 arguments in 5 years. That's the healthiest relationship I've ever had. Don't worry about it. Do you know what I mean? But I had to be really direct with him, and I was too direct. It hurt. But my intention, like he took it as a certain way and we had to have a talk about it, but my intention was never like, I wasn't saying like you're shit like, because I was only focused on one thing. He kind of took out, well, you know, that's not reflective of my work ethic. I was like, well, that's not what I meant. I'm just talking about this one thing. Again, I didn't bookend very well. I could have bookended that better. But nothing I do, like, I'm not an asshole. I don't want to hurt people with my words. I don't want anyone to feel bad. Like everything I do, like I love helping people, I love doing charity. I like, you know, social justice is really important to me, as is the most with most neurodivergent people. I just want people I want the best of people. I used to have no boundaries, and I used to have a big radar for narcissists on my back because of my empathy and I'm overly giving. And I had to do a lot of work on that. But when I say I'm not rude, it's because I know in my core, there isn't, I can be nasty if you're nasty to me and I'm reacting, but like when I was younger, but there isn't a nasty bone in my body where I'm intending in ill intention. Does that make sense? So when I say I'm not rude, that's what I mean. And most people will have that grasp, neurodivergent or not. Some people won't realize what's considered nasty. And this is, you know, where we're really dipping into a spectrum now. So don't think that question of where is the line between rude and perception and directness has a singular answer. I think that would be very much on a one-to-one basis. And how I could help with that, for example, is speaking to people and just seeing where they're at. Because I've met people where they'll say something, you just think, oh, you can't say that, because they've got no grasp.
Did you mean that the way that I heard it?
Yeah. No, not necessarily did you mean it how I heard it. It's like, did you mean it how you said it?
Well, yes. Let
me give an example, because I've got one.
Go on.
You can say to somebody, because I love this is my favorite. You can say to somebody, you are so beautiful, you could stop time. Or you could say, your face would stop a clock. Same message. Very offensive, the second one. And some people wouldn't be able to grasp why are they not the same message. And so that's a whole different, deeper dive to the meaning of words.
Well, so a concept or a new phraseology to a concept that came to me last year was what you fill your cup up with, you serve.
Okay.
So when you're in a positive mindset, and somebody said your face could stop a clock, you're more likely to perceive that positively, even though it could be construed as negative. If you're already in a foul mood and somebody says you're so beautiful, time could stand still, you might perceive that ill because you're already ready to perceive ill.
Right.
And then the flip side of, if I'm already in a foul mood and I go into a coaching session, how empathetic am I going to be? Because I'm not centered, because I'm not in the right space to be a support for someone, because I haven't dealt with my own crap. So, you know, it's making sure that your cup doesn't spill over into others, unless it's full of love and joy and that's what you want to serve. But yeah, if you're in a foul mood, then going into a conflict situation or a highly charged situation when you're already in a bad mood, it's probably not going to end well.
It's not. And that, ironically, as is the theme of today's chat, it all goes back to awareness and knowing how to ask for stuff. So I did a recording with someone recently. Didn't actually agree with what they said, but I didn't interrupt at the time because there's no need to. But what he'd said was, we were talking about first impressions and things like LinkedIn meetings and if you meet somebody. And I'd said that somebody turned up 15 minutes late with no apology when he arrived. And when I made a sarcastic joke about it, he was just like, well, I'm only 15 minutes late. And I didn't like that attitude. So I just said, no, thank you. I'm going to stop this call. And what the guy on the call said was, you know, if somebody cancels a meeting, then that he would then judge that. See, I don't agree, because I don't want to go in meetings with people if they're not ready to receive me. Equally, unless it's something that can't be moved, or let's be honest, I know that somebody wants to talk about content, I will make myself ready for that chat. But if it's just a networking meeting or just getting to know, or even a recording, if I'm not in the right headspace, I will move it. I never used to. I used to do like 13 meetings back to back. I'd be exhausted, I'd be tired, I'd be ratty, and then I'd end up just like not. I had a conversation with somebody that I know she thought I was a knob. She was being nervous and she just didn't make any room for me, and I just gave up halfway through. And that was that. And that could have possibly been a better interaction. But I believe, and this is my belief on stuff, is that things happen when they're meant to. Which is something I said earlier. Yeah. And it's okay that if that time is not now, because if I had a guy didn't turn up today, but his son had been rushed to hospital, okay, that's fine. If you force yourself to have that half an hour call, you're going to spend the whole time distracted thinking about your son. And that's okay. Like, of course, that is the priority. Like in life, things do happen. And I think we have so much onus, unless somebody's traveled and then we cancel like 5 minutes to go and they traveled 3 hours. That is a dick move. But if it's a Zoom meeting, then these things happen. I had to cancel one last week and the fella said, you're cancelling with 4 minutes to go. The reason I was cancelling was because my electronics kept tripping. The meeting I just had before tripped out 4 times. We had to switch to phone. My phone signal was really bad. My signal was really awful. And my speaker doesn't work properly. I was like, well, I could either put you through that situation, or we can move to another time where that experience is the nice one for you.
So I'm torn on this, because I think one of the greatest gifts you can give is your time. And if I'm giving up my time for a conversation, you better bloody well show up, because we've agreed that you're going to show, that we're both going to show up.
But that's what you're saying. Listen to what you're saying. You are going to show up. If I'm going to show up, my internet isn't working, my speaker isn't working, I can't hear you. I'm not showing up.
This is why I said I'm torn. I've worked in organisations where managers move meetings constantly. My last job I left in July. Appraisals were meant to be done by the end of March. I still hadn't finished my appraisal by the end of July.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, at some point in time, you have to ask yourself, is the person that you're meeting truly meeting you for the benefit of you? Are they moving things because you're not the priority? And it's okay to have other priorities, then communicate them. Hang on a minute. I've got a meeting with you at 2:30. I'm running late. Sorry, can we push it back 15 minutes? Perfect. I understand the context. I can move it 15 minutes. That's not a problem. You not telling me anything and rocking up at 3:00 in the afternoon. Hey, where are you? Well, I was on the call half an hour ago when we were meant to be on the call. You didn't come.
This I agree with. Let me preface the fact that I'm saying if you move stuff, you obviously have to communicate. There has to be context and share that context. Yeah. But don't just move it and just expect people are going to beat to your drum, because that's just rude.
Yeah. Or book a meeting in a meeting room.
Yeah.
And then I'm sitting in the meeting room waiting for you, and I can hear you outside having a chat for 20 minutes. Yeah. Hi, I am in the meeting room waiting for you.
This is why I said that there's no silver bullet to any of these things, and why it does depend on a case by case basis. And we've gone off tangent for our original point now. Is just having that space, and that, like what we were talking about, was more communication and being in the right headspace. And if you're negative or if you're in a positive mood, because we're not talking about all meetings right now, we're just talking about when you're not in the right mindset to meet people mentally, then it's okay to say, look, let's just move. Yeah. I had one today that I'm just not ready to talk about, and I'm not going to be able to action it. It's me joining them. So me paying them money to join their facility, and I'm not going to be able to do it for 6 weeks because I've got staff off, I've got all these things. And they confirmed the meeting. I said, you know what? Actually, can we push it? Because even if I liked it, I'm not going to do it for 2 months. Yeah. So it doesn't put them out. It doesn't ruin their day. They haven't invested in anything. It's me parting with the money. It's me parting with my resources. Sometimes it's okay as long as you have those conversations, just speaking to your actual point of being in the right headspace or not. Sometimes it's okay to wait until you are. Not always. There's no right and wrong for every different solution, but
And sometimes a botched conversation is better than no conversation.
Do you think?
Yeah. I would rather...
Oh, you're talking about communication rather than...
Well, I would rather hear bad news badly than not hear bad news.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah. You're saying botched communication is better than no communication. Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I misunderstood.
That's fine. So we've gone an hour and a half.
Okay. Let's take the here, shall we?
It's all good. It's all good. So what I normally ask towards the end of our conversations is a question that I've picked up from a podcast that I listen to, but it tweaks slightly. So their question is, what's the one thing that we're not talking about that we should be talking about?
Mm-hmm.
And mine is more of a positive frame to the people I have on, because many of you are self-advocating. And that's, what's one thing that we haven't talked about today that you wanted to talk about that we haven't had time to talk about?
We've covered everything I wanted to talk about.
Good, tick.
I think if I had to pick one, it's not beating yourself up. Especially in, obviously my specialism is comms. And as you said, it's a Maslow's hierarchy, right? It's important. I think we don't talk about the fact enough that we give ourselves so much pressure to get things right. Just give yourself a break.
First attempt in learning. You haven't failed.
You've been like, even my I get this stuff and I coach this stuff, and even I have a therapist that tells me to stop beating myself up. I've been doing the same thing for I'm 33 this year, got my diagnosis last year, so 32 years. I've been figuring things out on my own for 32 years. It's going to take me a lot less to get it right or get it more comfortable. But, it still takes time.
Your thoughts on labels as excuses and the measure between excuses and reasons?
Labels as excuses. So we touched on that already, and we've said that it's okay for using as understanding. Some people, and this might be hard because those people might not be listening to this podcast, but some people like to have a victim mentality, and this is where the truth really hurts. For you to get the best out of your life, it's your responsibility to do that. No one's going to come along and fix it for you. There is no prince or princess charming. If you're not comfortable the way things are, unfortunately, you're the one that has to do the hard work to get through that. And when we just label ourselves and say, oh, I'm dyslexic, I'm autistic, I've got ADHD, you just come and meet me where I'm at, and that's it. It's lazy. No one is going to move around you like water. You do need to still try, because there are ways. You're not going to be able to do everything. And even though you do try, and you might not be able to do things the same way that I might, or you might, or anybody else. But at least you're trying. That is the difference. And you are finding what does work for you. If you're just sitting back and saying, oh, can't be bothered.
This is me.
This is me, take me or leave me. You're saying my way or highway again. You're being no better than the company saying, oh, you should have done the number plate better. You're not being flexible. You can't expect the world to be flexible to you if you're not going to then be flexible within yourself and try and work towards that. You're not earning it. You can't just be given a free pass. You didn't choose to be this way. That's fine. But, you can't expect the world to bend to you, because 7.8 billion people can't do that. So labels as excuses. Stop being lazy. Stop being scared and go and figure it out. Find a way that works for you. For me, it was, finding the right people, I think, is so important. Finding people that think like you. So first of all, you don't feel alone. So many things my neurotypical friends don't get. They try, they just don't get it. And that's okay. Like, it's not their job to get me. So I go to speak to people like you, and I find other people on LinkedIn, and I find my community, and I find my safe space. There was a woman yesterday, actually, I try not to pull this out. I don't want her shame, so I don't want her found. She was on a social media platform, and it was a forum where people would talk about their stories. And sometimes it's nice to say, am I going crazy or am I seeing this in the right way? And she was trying to say that, but I'll just tell the story. She'd been away for 3 weeks of work. Her boyfriend picked her up. He planned a date. He was really excited. She said, I'm really tired. Can I just have a few hours to myself? Dropped her off. She got hyper-focused playing a game with her friends. Didn't check her phone. It was way too late. She completely missed all her boyfriend's calls, missed everything. He made an effort and he was like, right, I'm on the verge of breaking up with you now. This is just too much. You've prioritized me. And she said to him, listen, it's not that big a deal. Let's just meet tomorrow. What she's actually done is gaslit him, and actually she is in the wrong, but she can't see that. She's to blame. And so she was like, well, I've got ADHD, I can't help it. Having ADHD or autism or dyslexia or whatever neurodivergence you have is not an excuse to treat people like shit. So in that scenario, there are so many things she could have done hyper-focused and not realised, but there's areas that she can work on. So work on the things that you can if you want the world to be flexible to you.
Yeah. And the irony in that story is that they both had a need for connection, but they sought it differently.
She could have communicated that she just didn't want a date tonight. She just wanted to play.
Yeah.
And she prioritized her friends, which is the underlying, well, do you really want this guy? Which is not our place to say, but there were things that could have been done better, and where she thought it wasn't a big deal, like she was causing harm to another person. And that's our job to say, okay, can I actually see things in a different way? And if I just can't see that, give that other person that space to say, is this the relationship I want? Because if it's not for him, there will be another person that could maybe game with her.
Well, if she'd said, great idea, but what I want to do is just play on this game for 2 hours, then any boyfriend worth his salt would have joined on a game.
He didn't get given the chance, though.
Well,
she just said, because she told the story.
Yeah, leave me alone.
she just said, I've got ADHD, I can't help it. And that is generally what a label as an excuse looks like. Yeah. There will be something you can help, so let's help that. And that's my 2 bits.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, it's been lovely having you on.
It's been lovely chewing the fat. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And you can find Alia all over the internets, and she will send me some links with her book and her site, and we'll put them in the bio, and then you can go check her out, because she is available for coaching. And she has a book. And you should all go and buy it and make her very, very, very slightly less poor.
Well, my DMs are always open, so people are always welcome to reach out to me and we can have a chat.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.